What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Always Hope podcast, the show that provides solutions to better life that are anchored on faith and psychological and counseling research. My name is Dr. Mario Sacasa, licensed marriage and family therapist, and my goal is to provide the premier mental health and wellness podcast for you to be able to listen to. Well, in today's show, we're going to talk about dating. Why is it that so many people feel like the modern dating scene has just become a dumpster fire? And what are the unique challenges faced by Catholic young adults? And honestly, what is it that we can do to make the dating scene just a little bit more enjoyable? Joining me on the show today is Rachel Hoover Canto, author of the book Pretty Good Catholic: How to Find, Date, and Marry Someone Who Shares Your Faith. We have a wonderful conversation where we discuss ways men can round out their interests beyond just Catholic things, the importance of meeting new people continuously, the value of non-exclusive dating, ways that women can show their interest and how they can be respectful when men ask them out, even if they're not interested in going on a date with them, and how to start a conversation with people that you are attracted to. If you enjoyed this episode, then please check out my program, Dating Well, which would be a wonderful resource to help you better understand the modern dating scene and how to navigate it with complete confidence. Well, let's get into this conversation with Rachel Hoover Canto. Rachel Hoover Canto, welcome to the Always Hope podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being present with us today and joining me and my listeners to talk about your new book, Pretty Good Catholic: How to Find, Date, and Marry Someone Who Shares Your Faith, published by Vianney Vocations, which will have links to the book and to other resources that you have in the show notes. But just so grateful that you put this book together. I enjoyed reading it. I found it very helpful, very practical. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. So the place where I would like to start, let's just jump right into this, is in the book, you did a tremendous amount of research. I mean, you interview a number of folks, matchmakers, psychologists, therapists. You reference priests. You have Reddit forums that you went on, which is incredible, and your own little survey that you did. And so you just talked to a lot of different people to get as many different angles on the topic as best as you could, whether it's boots on the ground or listen to experts or everything in between. Mm-hmm. So as you did all this research, okay, what is the number one complaint that you heard from women specifically when it comes to dating?
So I guess I should say I was talking mostly to Catholics. I don't know whether this is different outside the Catholic bubble, so with that little caveat. But
yep, that's good.
A lot of Catholic women were saying men are either really, living their faith, living chastity, desiring marriage, they're serious about it, or they're fun and interesting to be around. But they're rarely both, unfortunately. And that was not too surprising to me from my own experience as well. I had to look around and say, sadly, I wish it weren't true, but a lot of the guys I encounter are kind of falling into one or the other. And yet I don't think God intended us to be that way, right? You can be faithful and you can also be fun, and both are really important, I think, for a happy relationship.
I absolutely agree. And that's the same complaint that I've heard from so many, as I've traveled to college campuses and spoken to young adult groups as well. That's been the same thing that I've heard. Okay, so we'll hold that in a second, right there. What about for men? What's the number one complaint that you heard from men in the dating space?
Basically that they are struggling to actually ask women out, even if they want to, because they see that women are either always kind of congregating in a little knot of friends and not really looking open to conversation at all. A guy feels really rude or kind of creepy if he just barges into a circle of women and pulls one aside and says, "I want your number," right? Or maybe he does get an individual conversation with her, but he just can't tell whether she's sending interested signals or not. So women can tend to just be kind of cold and closed off, or maybe they seem really friendly. He makes the move, he asks her out, and then she's horrified and she's like, no, I was just being friendly. We're just friends. What are you talking about? And so there's this mismatch of the signals that a woman is trying to send with the way that a man usually tends to read them. We've kind of lost that art of flirtation and subtle hints, I
Hmm.
guess. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of multi-layered, but that's what I was hearing from men. Just women are just hard to ask out. They say they want to be asked out, but then they don't really give me a chance to do it.
Yeah. I think I just heard a bunch of men say "Amen" in chorus, to the response there. So if we can kind of look at both those, all right,
Mhm.
let's look at the complaint for women that men often fall into two. It's like the Venn diagram that the middle doesn't really touch. It's
Mhm.
Catholic and not interesting, interesting and not Catholic. And I know this is probably oversimplification, but just bear with me, people. And then there's a small circle where the bubbles converge. In the research and what you did leading up to writing the book, do you have any sense of what we can do to solve that problem? Like, what do
Mhm.
you think are some practical solutions or ways that we can kind of get those bubbles to maybe get a little bit more convergence?
Yeah, it sounds really simple, but something that I've seen happening in my Catholic community locally that I think is really good is that lots of Catholics and Christians are just sort of banding together to do things that are just fun. They're branching out beyond just having a Bible study or just going to church and then, maybe talking a little bit over the coffee afterward or some kind of study group. I think oftentimes our faith has become very intellectualized for the last few decades or so. I'm not
Yep.
sure exactly where it comes from, but
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Probably
yeah,
since the '90s when the apologetics first started coming out, which
exactly.
rightfully had to happen, I understand, but
Exactly. Yeah.
we've gone too far into one
I think
extreme. Yeah,
it's so
keep going.
important to have that intellectual side and to
Yep,
have that
yep, yep.
foundation. But
100%.
I see more and more, it's just happening organically on the ground. Young adults saying, well, let's just get together and have a volleyball tournament, just kind of, or a pickup ultimate frisbee league. Where they're playing sports, they're going dancing at, line dancing is really big in Nashville. I don't know if it's big everywhere, but they're
I don't think it's big everywhere,
yeah.
but I can see why it's big in Nashville.
Just they're just trying to get out and do things that are innocent and wholesome and fun, but kind of doing it in community with other people of faith. So it's a good way to just meet each other and connect over common interests. And I'm really happy to see that. So when I give talks to young adult groups, I recommend to the guys, especially, although it goes for women too, just get involved in some of those things, whichever of those things that you're most genuinely interested in, and try to do something for your physical side, whether it's going to the gym and running
Mhm,
and things like that that are more consciously exercise, or maybe it is just going out dancing sometimes and making it
mhm.
social too. They should do something for their social life. Sometimes men kind of forget to just hang out with their friends and develop their social skills in kind of a natural human way. Something intellectual is great. If that's not already built into your work, then maybe you do need to be deciding to read a good book once in a while or joining the Bible study or whatever. That just shouldn't be your whole life. And then something spiritual, but again, it doesn't have to be like your only interest is the finer points of theology or something. It could just be maybe going to adoration once a week and actually having a conversation with the Lord and having that more personal relationship with God. So I kind of recommend going through those four things and looking at their lives and just thinking, am I missing a big piece here, or am I a well-rounded enough person? Because I think that makes people happier and healthier to have all those aspects of life being kind of fed, but it also makes them just so much more interesting and more attractive, and it brings you in the path of more people that you could meet, and you're connecting over common interests. And then if you're going to ask a girl out, you have to think of something you could do with her as a date. And if you just go to coffee over and over, that's going to get boring after a while. So maybe you need to find out what her interests are and say, let's go dancing together, or let's go rock climbing together. Let's do something kind of active. That could be a really good date idea too. So that's what I recommend. Just remembering that God created your whole personality and He created the whole world, and He wants us to be involved in lots of things and not just uh, thinking and talking about theology all the time. That's not what makes you necessarily a holy or faithful person. That should just be one
Yeah.
aspect of it.
So you should probably, I guess the question here is, how soon should a woman ask a guy to see his YouTube feed? Because that'll give them a real sense as to like who they're listening to, right? Uh,
Ooh, that that is a yeah. I never quite thought about it that way, but that would tell a lot about a person, wouldn't it?
Google's got you figured out. Like
Right.
you know, and it'll
But
tell you who you're interested in, who you've been listening to.
one thing
Yeah.
I heard recently from a Catholic matchmaker too, she was going through someone's Catholic match profile for him to kind of give
Hmm.
him tips on it. And she said, this isn't you. This is a Catholic robot that you're sort of projecting
Wow.
into the world because you think that that's what people want to see. You think that that's what
Mm,
Catholic women want to see. And she was like, I know that you're a drummer. Why didn't you mention that you're a drummer on your profile? That's something cool about you that maybe someone would
yeah.
like to see. So I think, yeah,
Did he
mentioning
give an
it.
answer as to why? Do you know what he said in response to that?
I don't know. Yeah, I only heard her side of it.
Yeah.
But I,
Because I can imagine guys. See, guys, you said this earlier that we struggle in social engagement, and it's because guys were very utilitarian, and even in our friendships, it's like, all right, what are we doing together? How are we accomplishing this task? Like, let's get this done. Let's go.
mhm,
And then we also are very quick to put things in order in a hierarchy. And so if you're saying that the faith is what's most important, then we're going to put that at the top. And maybe something like drumming wouldn't even be on the list because that might seem really low when when what we're really trying to communicate is that the faith is the thing that's most important.
mhm,
And what you're proposing is to help guys to see, like, let's calm that down a little bit.
mhm.
We're not telling you to hide the faith. We're not saying
Not at
don't
all.
do that, of
Mhm,
course, by all means, but you got to have something more that's going to make you interesting and engaging. And as you mentioned, going out on a date, not just what you're going to do, but what you're going to talk about. You
mhm.
can't just have, I think you make a joke in the book about, like, conversations can't just be about the fourth Lateran console. I mean, on the first
Exactly.
date, I mean, like, there's got to be more to that, in being able to see the person, understand them, and recognize their personality and the fullness of who they are as God created them to be.
Exactly. I think that hierarchy is great because the faith is the most important, but that doesn't mean that all the other things are unimportant. If the only thing that was important is I'm trying to find, I'm a Catholic man trying to find a Catholic wife, then you
Hmm.
could just pick any Catholic woman off the street and then there you go. You fulfilled all your criteria at the end. And we just know that that's not how it works. You have to have something else to sort of make you choose this particular person over anyone else in the universe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because it is a choice that you make, and there has to be some match. And it's beautiful that there's a foundation of faith, but there's so much other complexities that go into it: conversations, personality, quirks, interests, extroversion, introversion. I mean, there's a thousand other little traits that we can speak about that all go into the bucket of who this person is. And as you're trying to investigate and understand who that person is, you're also trying to discern whether or not there's a healthy enough match. And while it's wonderful to have the foundation of the faith, that alone can't be everything in a relationship. And I do think that sometimes is the mistake that is made. So your proposal is, let's make let's find ways of making the Catholic guys be a little bit more interesting. If we
Basically,
can do
yes.
that, then I think we can do it. And that's mostly because you're speaking to a Catholic audience, and
Right.
we would love
Ideally,
to
yeah,
tell
yeah.
the
Let's take
interesting
all the
guys to be a
secular
little bit more
guys and make them
Catholic.
more
Yeah.
faithful, yes,
Yes.
as well. But that's a much bigger project that others are working on. I think we can do both. Just make those two parts of the Venn diagram overlap a little more, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, let's make the interesting guys more faithful, and let's make that happen also, and then that way we can have a larger pool that's there. Now, you said beautifully that the number one complaint that guys are experiencing with women is they can't quite read the signals, and they don't know what to say, because not because they're not interesting or because they're trying, but because they just don't know, or she's not giving off exactly what he thought, and he's having a hard time. And maybe he'll ask her out, but he knows that her friend was asked out by his friend, and people talk within Catholic circles because they
Mhm.
tend to be kind of small. So even that becomes a hurdle of, like, if I ask her out, is she going to tell everybody? And how do I don't really want that to happen, because I don't want to get a reputation of being the guy who asks all the girls out in the young adult group. And so all of that kind of goes into the man's head and makes it difficult for him to take that step. And so
Yes.
what can we tell our ladies in terms of what can we do? What are practical suggestions that we can offer there to
Mhm.
make that a little bit of an easier process for guys to ask women out?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to say I gained even more appreciation and respect and compassion for men who are single and trying to date as I was interviewing them and writing this book, because I didn't always realize myself as a woman who was dating how much difficulty they were kind of going through and why this kind of overthinking and hesitation tends to happen. So it's easy for women to kind of say, well, they just need to man up and have some confidence and just do it, just ask me out. But there are lots of considerations that they are rightfully thinking about. So I think, number one, if a woman really wants to be pursued by men, she should intentionally cultivate those signals and understand better sort of how to send them. So things like when you show up to a party or whatever type of event, a lot of girls like to just kind of congregate with their friends who they already know right away and stay in that comfort zone. But I encourage having kind of a wing woman, someone who's going to hold you accountable. You maybe show up to the party together, but then you say, all right, we're going to go our separate ways for most of the night. We're going to intentionally try to meet new people, which could just be a new friend or whatever, that's a good starting point. But specifically, we're going to each try to meet a new guy we've never met before and just have a conversation. And just, it doesn't have to be someone you're even very interested in. It could just be someone new. And having that practice of meeting new people intentionally and that mindset that when you go into certain situations that are a good opportunity to meet other single people who might be eligible, that you have to consciously be open to that and do a little bit on your own side to kind of make that happen. I think some women they don't want to become the pursuer themselves. They want to be pursued, and they're afraid that they're being too bold by even just saying, hi, what's your name, to a guy who hasn't spoken to them yet, or walking up and joining a conversation with people they don't know. And I would like to just emphasize over and over, that's not pursuing. That's just showing that you're open to being pursued. That's letting the guy know that you exist, so that if he wants to pursue you, he's able,
Yes.
So there's that starting point. Like, let him know the door is there so that he can knock on it at least. And then if they're actually really interested in a specific guy, I think we need to be okay with maybe not totally taking over the role of pursuer by saying, can I take you on a date, or what's your number, but sending as many kind of somewhat subtler hints as possible. So a lot of it is body language, I think, just, not holding back on smiling and laughing and making plenty of eye contact and things like that. Hopefully it comes naturally if you kind of get into practice a little bit. But for myself, I tend to be kind of shy in a situation where I'm meeting someone new, and especially back when I was single, if I met someone I found very attractive, it was easy to just freeze up, right? So sometimes kind of coaching yourself mentally, like, nope, turn your body back toward him, make eye contact, those concrete things. We have to keep that in mind sometimes. And then I even say, if a guy doesn't seem to be picking up the hint after a few conversations like that, where you're really focused on him, like he's the only person in the world, and making it clear that you're interested, then he might just need an even stronger signal. Sometimes maybe you can drop a little hint that some fun activity that he's mentioned doing is maybe something you'd also like to try someday, and just kind of let that hang out there, so he knows the door is open if he wants to invite you to do it with him. But eventually, if you're dropping all of those hints and he's not doing anything, that could just be because he's not interested in you, and then you can kind of just let it go and move on without making it more direct than that, I think. So lots of body language and dropping those hints, and even just being separate from your friend group from time to time and just kind of walking around by yourself looking like you wouldn't be angry if someone you don't know walked up and started a conversation. I think those simple things can be so helpful. And then, of course, for some reason, it's become a little bit, I guess, politically incorrect almost to talk about this too much, but looking your best really does help. I think every woman is beautiful when she's taking good care of herself and dressing in, the colors and silhouettes that really help her to shine. I think it's important to experiment with those things and have a friend help you go through your wardrobe and see what actually looks good on you, what makes you feel your best too. Those are often the same thing. And then what might just be not doing you any favors. And then everywhere you go, you can challenge yourself to dress up just a little more than you really have to, and just make sure you're not looking in a way that you'd be embarrassed to meet a really cute guy or something,
Mhm.
because you never know. I know a couple who met in a grocery store parking lot, and they are married now, so it could happen anywhere, and it's good to be prepared to the extent you can. Of course, it's okay to wear your gym clothes when you're in the gym or something like that. Context is important, but sometimes we think that that our appearance just isn't always important, and then we get really dressed up for only certain occasions. And I think it's great to just look nice, so look like yourself, your best self, all the time, as far as
Yeah.
possible.
Oh man. Okay. Great things. Great things. All right. Guys, I want to piggyback on each of them. All right. So that last piece that you just said, I think applies to both men and women,
Yes, yes.
for in both contexts. Now, that doesn't mean that every time you go to the grocery store, you need to have your hair perfect for off the off chance that a cute guy is going to be there to ask you out. Like, we're not saying that, but your point is absolutely well taken, which is if you are in social circumstances and social settings, guys, you got to know how to be able to dress a little bit. Clothes that fit,
Mhm.
clothes that match. That's a great start right there. Not just wearing your superhero t-shirt or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe the girls are attracted to superhero t-shirt. If it looks good, if it's
Your
clean and
personality too. That's
yeah, show your personality. Exactly. I don't mean to be disparaging. I have superhero t-shirts, so that's why I can make fun of that. Okay. So I'm
siblings
not
can be
disparaging
great
anybody.
for some of this
Yeah.
too. If you have a sibling, or even if you are in circumstances, or maybe you have a long time, childhood friend who's definitely not a love interest or something, and
Yes, who's a
someone of the
female who
opposite
could
sex
tell
that you
you.
could say, "Does this
Absolutely.
really look good on me?" Or "What do you think I should wear tonight?" And kind of get practice of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, you want to start playing with you don't know what's going to fit. And so especially for guys, I mean for both, you don't know if that cut is going to look right or if that particular pattern is going to look right or if that color is going to look good on your skin tone or not. You don't know until you kind of start playing with that a little bit. So, and I think that that is absolutely important because I don't think it's shallow. I think it's just part of
Mhm.
the way that we communicate who we are. If JP2 says that the body reveals the person,
Mhm.
then how we dress communicates something about ourselves. And it communicates a sense of confidence, a sense of identity about who we are. Now, of course, we can get too wrapped up and it can become vain 100%. But virtue is about finding the middle ground. And if we can find the middle on that, I think
Mhm.
that that's absolutely important. And that's
Right.
great advice.
If we're not called to, a vow of extreme poverty and wearing a Franciscan habit or
Right.
something, we need to
Right.
dress for our state in life. I think St. Francis de Sales has some great quotes on this as well. Like, I think he even says, I would have the Catholic gentleman be the best dressed man in the room, not in an overly fancy way, but just in the sense that he has self respect, he has respect for the people around him, he's neat, he's um, there's sort of elegant simplicity with that is appropriate, I think, for a lot of lay people, just to show that we believe our bodies are a temple, and this is very important. And then the same for women. I think he even says, if she hopes to be married, then she should dress in a way that's attractive to men, so that they will be interested
Mhm.
in marrying her. And that's
Mhm.
just practical. That's part of it.
Yeah, it is. And so that first piece that you talked about with regards to women finding the balance between being open to conversation and being the one who pursues. There's a distinction there that I really like.
Mhm.
That if you're in a social situation, it's perfectly okay for you to strike up a conversation with a stranger. If there's a guy that, and that's what you're saying, right? I mean, that it's okay for you to begin conversations with groups of men or others. Or what do you think about that?
I think I think especially if you see someone just kind of by himself as well, that can be a great opportunity to really to step out in charity to some extent. You don't necessarily think he's super attractive or whatever, but just to say, "Are you new here? How are you?" Just something simple, and then feel it out. See if he's interested in continuing that conversation. That was something that used to be really, really hard for me. Again, I was just very shy, but a few times I decided I'm just I'm just going to do that, because as soon as anytime someone's done that for me when I was kind of by myself, and someone came up and started a conversation with me, I never thought it was strange. I thought it was wonderful because then I had someone to
Yeah.
talk to. So after that initial just hello, what's your name? Nothing seems weird or awkward after that usually. So I think that's not romantic pursuit at all. That's just I'm being friendly. I'm being kind to the people around me, especially if you're doing that for kind of everyone you meet and not just the one most attractive guy in the room or something.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but there's also well, I could be going on a tangent here, but I think
No, go.
oftentimes women don't necessarily feel super attracted to a guy right away until they get to know him a little bit anyway. So you never know who you're going to find more interesting as you get to know him. So it's a good idea to just be open to meeting and chatting a little bit with anyone who kind of comes across your path, and then see what happens from there.
But I think for guys, particularly because they may struggle with a woman that they are attracted to know how to have a conversation or how to start a conversation, they may feel nervous or not sure what to say. My encouragement is to start in a more low risk environment where you do just randomly start a conversation with another guy who you don't know in an event. Okay. Or maybe start a random conversation with a woman that you're not attracted to, but that you just are getting those reps in, so to speak, about
Mhm.
conversations. And then you work your way up to somebody that you are attracted to. And being able to have some type of progression there, I think even for guys is really important,
Mhm.
because one of the principles that you make in the book, and I really like it, is just be this notion of just being open to dating, just being open and
Mhm.
and recognizing that it's okay to just be open. There seems to be another area that we find some pushback is the sense that dating has to be for marriage, and like what's the difference between dating and courtship. And in my program I talk about different stages of dating, and that kind of second stage of casual dating, which probably isn't the best term. I'd probably say more exploratory, where I think like the word you use is non-exclusive dating. That tends to be a little bit better. Casual, I think, has some connotations that people misinterpret in that. But the point is that you can still have these non-exclusive conversations, dates, engagements with people, and still be pursuing marriage. It doesn't mean that like the person that you meet right now is going to be, you have to figure out in these 10 minutes at this young adult event if this is the person that you're going to marry. And if you don't know that, then you're wasting your time and you're wasting her time, and that's the end of it. And this pressure that we've placed on having to make sure that dating is always geared towards that is, I think, something that we just need to reassess. And I'm grateful that you do that reassessment in the book.
Yeah, I think the whole topic of non-exclusive dating is probably the most controversial thing that I said in the book. Definitely
Yes.
get the most questions, or even outright, never mean. It's always been very kind, but pushback
Yeah. Yeah.
against that. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know, going on dates with more than one person at the same time. That just, some people think it just sounds too overwhelming. Some people think it just sounds sort of icky or
Fair.
wrong somehow.
Sure. Sure. And if that's you,
Overwhelming
that's
is one
fine.
thing, but
Sure.
wrong is
Sure.
a different. It's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
in the Bible or the Catechism says that you can't do this, right? And I think, especially, I think from men, I tend to hear, I'm afraid I'll get a reputation. You kind of already touched on this. The girls
Right.
might be talking to each other. I'm afraid I'll get a reputation for just being that guy who asks everyone out. And what if she finds out that I'm seeing other people, and then she's horrified? And or even just for themselves, feeling like I feel like that I'm a player or something, And
Hmm.
I've had to, I think, really encourage people to just, okay, maybe it's not, you don't need to force it to happen. You don't have to force yourself to be going out on dates with three people at the same time. If there's only one person you're interested in, that's fine. Just only go on dates with that person and pursue that. But I I think if you do happen to be even a little interested in more than one person, I just want to emphasize that there's nothing at all wrong with getting to know each one a little bit, um, usually by setting up a time and a place to meet and having a conversation, which is pretty much what a date is, and
Hmm.
just doing that until you have some reason to kind of kindly and gently part ways with one or the other, or both. You just, in the same way that we get to know new friends without going 0 to 60 on just one person and saying, "Oh, we got to figure out if you're my best friend for life." We can get
Right.
to know different people who may or may not end up being a future boyfriend or girlfriend, fiance, spouse. It can just be a little bit more natural, a little bit more human, very low pressure in the beginning, and then kind of gradually getting to that deeper level where you're very seriously discerning marriage. And I see that as all part of ultimately dating for marriage, and dating very intentionally.
Hmm.
There's a way to be intentionally casual, I think, or
Yeah. I
intentionally
say intentional, but not intense. That's the word. That's what I say.
yes, yes,
Yes.
exactly.
You can be intentional, but not have to be so intense.
Right. I think another way that I say it in the book too is shallow can be good if it's a preparation for possibly going deeper. You
That's
can,
beautiful.
you
I
don't need
like
to
that.
jump straight
Yeah,
into the deep end. You can wade in
that's
step
right.
by step and then decide if you want to go one step further.
Yeah. But I think that this is another one of the consequences of our transient society where everybody's moving and people are going to new jobs and new cities all the time. And because people are then meeting and getting married later than what historically has been the case, the way that you meet people, the way that you meet potential spouses is completely changed. Where before it was more common to be dating in high school and meeting somebody within your local community and then getting married very young, sometimes in college or even before. And then, but that's somebody who was in your community. Your family knew who the boy was. There was connection. There was already an established foundation that was present. And that just isn't the case anymore. And so when you're
Right.
meeting people for the first time, there has to be some space for just getting to know somebody, for just some type of acquaintance to occur or some type of
Mhm.
relationship to be happening, to be forming. And there needs to be a little bit more space for that as you're just trying to understand, is this person even somebody I like, or even somebody that I can carry on a conversation with, let alone spend the rest of my life with? We're just trying to understand basic principles at this point. If I can even spend time with them, if I do have interest in going rock climbing or uh, going kayaking or going line dancing or whatever else those other things are, going to church, all of that kind of comes out in those first couple encounters and those first couple dates that you're just trying to understand. And I think it is absolutely necessary in our day and age because we are so transient and
Mhm.
because we are so disconnected from those institutions that used to provide means for being able to meet people. Where it's just very different now.
Right. Yeah. People were sort of vetted a little bit in advance. You kind
Yes.
of knew, you knew if there was anything really bad to know about this person, I'd probably find it out. Maybe that's a way that the gossip grapevine can almost be good. But yeah, now we're really just often going into something completely blind. And that's maybe especially true if you meet online. But even if you meet in person, there's not as much history there. Um, but then at the same time, there is the issue of the small young adult group where everybody talks. And so another thing that I guess I'm circling back a little bit, but I wanted to
Mhm.
say about for women to kind of facilitate being asked out more, I think more of us women really need to make it a policy not to talk in too much detail about who asked us out, who we're going on dates with everyone else who's also single. You should have people in your life you can talk with about your dating life, but maybe it's someone who's already married. Maybe it's um, a one or two just very close trusted people who you know are not going to be sort of in competition with you, and even then you can be careful about naming names. When I kind of realized this issue that men were having, I decided, I'm going to basically treat the guys I'm going out with the way I would want to be treated. I'm not going to tell everybody I know that I went on a date with this guy, because what if he asks her out tomorrow? I want him to feel free to do that because we're not
Mhm.
exclusive right now and we're not in that serious stage. And so I started just giving them all code names. It would be something silly, but my husband, because he was starting nursing school, he was medical man for a long time and he didn't say his name to anybody. So I was like, I don't know if it's going to work out or not.
Mhm.
And the idea of guys, sort of treating me similarly and giving me a code name when they talk to their friends. I hope they were doing that. It would have been really appreciated, so that I didn't kind of get a reputation, so to speak, either.
Mhm.
But another whole piece of this too, I think what makes us feel icky about being non-exclusive for a while is the idea that a date has to mean that something physical may have happened, or at least something very
Right.
emotional may have happened. And so I think a really key piece of this that makes it all make more sense to people is that we're not saying that you need to go 0 to 60 on physical affection, even, much less like sleeping together. In fact, I mean, I have a whole chapter on it in the book, but I talk about kind of slow rolling your physical affection so that it follows where your relationship actually is and follows the other foundations you're building. So if you're in that early kind of non-exclusive phase where you may or may not be seeing other people, you could just have a brief goodbye hug, maybe, if you're comfortable with it, but you really shouldn't be going further than that, because it is really gross if you think about like
Hmm.
kissing even multiple people within the
Hmm.
same week or something like that.
Right. Right.
So I think people connect the word date to something really romantic, something very intense may have happened, and I think if we get away from that and realize that that doesn't have to be part of the equation at all, it could have truly just been
Right.
a conversation, just two people kind of hanging out in more of a friendship way, but with that intention of
Hmm.
considering
Yep.
whether we're going to go deeper into a romance, then it all makes a lot more sense that you could be doing that with a few people for a little while before kind of focusing on just one person.
Hey everybody, this is Dr. Mario Sakasa. I'm just taking a quick break from my conversation with Rachel Hoover Canto to encourage you to go on over to drmariosakasa.com. There you will find 2 resources available to you to help you navigate the dating scene. First and foremost, on the website, I have a freebie called the Dating Toolkit, and on it you will find 30 great conversation starters to get you going with some confidence and how to begin conversations, and also how to be able to end a first date gracefully. Sometimes that's part of the conversation too, is you don't really know how to end things appropriately. You can head on over to drmariosakasa.com and download that for free today. Also on my website, you will find my course, Dating Well, which goes through all the ins and outs of the modern dating scene. If you have recently broken up with somebody and not sure why things didn't work out for you, if you're currently in a relationship and want to know a little bit more about what flags you should be looking for, what's good, what's bad, or if you're single and thinking about starting a relationship sometime soon and want to be as best prepared to take that relationship and make it the most successful relationship that you've ever had, then please head on over to drmariosakasa.com and check out Dating Well. It's all available for you on the website. Yep. Shallow, as you said, moving into the depths. Now, there are, of course, circumstances where, I mean, I know that you've had conversations with friends, and I have too, that they date people who say they're Catholic or they're not Catholic, and they're very clear. The date's very clear that by the second date, the expectation is, sexual intercourse or something of that nature.
Mhm.
And obviously, those are where you have to have very firm boundaries. But
Yes.
I have found that as people get older, I don't know. I think I'm just hearing that more often.
Hmm.
And I think folks are just getting just clearly discouraged by that and by that pressure that seems to be placed on them, that by the second, third date, the expectation is that something's going to happen. And it's like, nope, no, thank you. We have to draw those boundaries. Um, did you hear anything about that side of things, that people going out, they think there's a nice guy or good guy and or good girl, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, never mind. I was misinterpreting something.
Yeah, I definitely heard that. I think especially from people who were doing online dating.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's, I'm sure it could happen with someone you met in
sure,
person, but usually these are people
sure.
who are, yeah, they're going on, one of the popular dating apps and looking for people whose profiles said Catholic, and they would find out quickly on the first date that at least that this person doesn't really go to church, doesn't really believe anything. They just filled that in because the spot was there or whatever,
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
and don't really care much about what it means. And usually, I guess a lot of the people I know kind of picked up pretty quickly that if he doesn't believe in even going to church, then he probably doesn't believe in all my other boundaries either. Maybe this just isn't a fit. But I think some good advice that I've heard from, again, some matchmakers who've worked with people kind of all over the spectrum is that if you if you introduce boundaries in smaller things, that hopefully you're sending the right signal to
Yep,
someone, and he's going to go running, he or she, because it could go either way, is
yep,
going to
yep.
go running, so if on a first date they kind of go in for the kiss and you're like, you're
Mm-mm,
wonderful, but I'm just not ready for that yet, and something
mhm,
kind of gentle like that, then they know, well, definitely nothing more than a kiss is happening yet, and you can
mhm.
kind of ease into having a more direct conversation about you know, sex and all those boundaries if it continues at all. But oftentimes that seems to just weed people out pretty quickly, which is very discouraging if everyone's getting weeded out. But it's much better to weed someone out early on over an issue like that could be so detrimental later. Um, yeah, I have a friend in particular who she's a little older than I am, so she had quite a bit of dating experience beyond me, and was running into a lot of situations of, yeah, just men who either they were initially talking about, yeah, I want marriage, I want something long term, and then kind of changed the message later, or just were kind of vague about what their purpose was, but said they were Christians. So she kind of assumed, I assume he wants marriage and children. What else would he want, right? And then she said, I've just learned you have to ask directly at some point. Are you interested in marriage? Are you open to having children? What do you think about
Mm-hmm.
this and that? And unfortunately, several said, I maybe they were like, I'd be okay with marriage, but it's not important to me, or I definitely couldn't have children. I don't want to do that. And so her advice to me was, as awkward as it might be, you got to ask some of those questions by like the fourth date, which is pretty early, for some of those big.
No, but that's good. Fourth date is a good marker, because sometimes people think by the first date you need to know the answers to those questions, and I'd say no, but I think fourth date is a good marker.
Right.
If you don't know by then, you need to know at least some sense
Yeah.
as to
And
whether there's a possibility here.
in my experience with, dating guys who were, faithful and did think marriage was important and all that, usually I think within 3 or 4 dates, they just kind of naturally mention something that gives you the right
Yeah,
clue.
comes out in
They're going to say
conversations.
something like, yeah, someday when I'm married, XYZ, or with my future
Yeah,
kids, I'd love to do this. And then you know
yeah.
that they're at least open
Or I
to
was at my
it.
brother's house and playing with his kids, had a great time. Can't wait to
Right,
have some of my
right.
own. Like, it just kind of comes out.
So if someone
Or
just,
I was at my sister's house and I saw her kids, and they drove me nuts, and never want to see them or something.
yeah, or if the topic just seems strangely avoided, and they're only
Yeah.
talking about kind of continuing life the way they have it now and don't seem to have any goals along those lines, and then maybe there's you can still ask directly just to make sure, but I think you can kind of pick that up usually, especially on the positive side. People who are very interested in dating for marriage and having children tend to be excited about those things and start dropping those hints
Mhm.
pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Now, going back to something you said earlier about women and how to be able to give those signals, and guys knowing how to interpret those signals a little bit more. So you're having a conversation with somebody. What would be for the guy, okay, who's kind of paying attention to the girl? What should he be looking for as a way to interpret? Oh, she's interested, and what are the type of cues that can help guys who are listening to pay attention to?
It's a little hard, I
I know that's what makes it
because
so hard for guys, but
right. Well, and also because I think women, again, not having this be just sort of a clear cultural norm or code that it's sort
right,
of fed to
right,
us. Sometimes I
right.
think we all behave very differently, and that's why it's
Well, I
important
think
to
there's
get
also just a diversity within women, and I know that's a
there.
buzzword, so nobody, but there is. It's just there's just a wider spectrum in terms of how
Hmm.
women interact and how they connect, and what one might interpret as ick, the other might find that endearing, and so
Right.
there is very much a variance that's present there.
Yeah. I think in general, if she seems like she is actively continuing the conversation, that is a good sign. So if I'm assuming an in-person situation where,
Yep,
but it
that's what
could
we're
work
talking about.
with
Yeah, sure,
messaging on an app too.
sure, sure.
If you're, maybe you start it as the guy by just, are you new here? Something simple. And instead of just answering and then kind of turning away from you, that's a very closed off signal. But if she says, I am pretty new, how about you? And then she's asking you questions in return, and kind of,
Hmm.
if the conversation starts to die down, if she kind of starts it up again after a second and wants to keep it going, I think that's a very good sign. Again, it's not a absolutely universal signal that she's in love with you, but it's a sign that she's not wanting to get out of the conversation and get away from you. She's open
Hmm.
to at least getting to know you a little bit, and that's a really good start. I think, especially if she's just smiling a lot and laughing at things you say that you know, maybe you were maybe we're kind of funny, but not quite that funny.
Uh-huh,
I
uh-huh.
think a lot of women laugh a lot when they're very happy and feeling like excited about something. That's the way that it kind of comes out. So
Hmm.
those are some signals, and then not all. I think a lot of women are more reserved and wouldn't do this ever, so it's a little harder. But if she does do something like leaning closer to you or like tapping your arm a little bit,
I
especially
was
if you've
going to
known her
ask
for a
that in
little
terms
while.
of
She
physical
might,
touch, like where she's touching
right.
the shoulder or something,
Yes,
like,
if she knows you well enough to feel comfortable doing that at all,
mhm.
and she starts doing things like that, I think that's pretty clear that she's not. She's probably feeling somewhat attracted, and at least not wanting to kind of put up a wall between herself and you. So I think that, yeah, those are a few. Also, I would say listen for the maybe the verbal hints if she is like, oh yes, I've been wanting to do that too. Oh yes, I also
Mhm.
I have that in common
Definitely.
with you. If she's really pointing out things you have in common or things she's interested in that you've brought up, then those could definitely be signals that she's hoping to continue connecting with you in different ways, and that maybe she's even dropping the hint to just go ahead and take her on a date to do that thing together and just kind of see where it goes. So eventually, I think guys do just have to take a risk and ask, even if they're not quite sure if she's interested or not. I think I want to say to women, don't ever act angry if a guy asks you out. You
Mm,
can say, you can obviously say no. You don't have to be interested. You don't have to say
right.
yes to it. But I think we should always do our best to consider it an honor, at least a little bit, and at least
A
just,
compliment at
yes,
least.
it's a
Yeah,
compliment.
it's a
It's at
compliment.
least
Yeah,
it's something innocent, even
yeah,
if you were completely unaware that he was interested at all and it
yep.
doesn't seem like the right fit. Don't be angry with him for that. You can just say, I'm sorry, I just don't see you that way. I don't feel that way about you. And just be as kind as you can in letting him down. Because oftentimes when I interviewed guys, they were sort of scared off from asking women out, not just because of the lack of positive signals, but because they had received such very negative or angry kind of
Mm,
takedowns in the past, which was just
mm,
unnecessary,
yeah.
And anybody who knows me who's listening might know that I probably have made the same mistake myself. Every mistake I mentioned in the book is probably something I also did. So I'm,
Sure, sure. That's usually how this works.
I'm taking the beam out of my own eye slowly over time. But yeah, I just it's he can't read your mind. He couldn't know for certain that you were definitely not
Uh-huh.
interested. It's not his fault.
Yeah,
So
it's tough.
I think if we're a little more,
Gracious.
yes, just
Yeah.
gracious and
Mhm.
charitable, then
Thank
that'll
you,
give more
thank you. I
men more
appreciate that, but
confidence as well.
I'm
Yeah,
not interested. Kind of just a simple script right there,
exactly.
is I
Yes,
think is helpful.
yes.
But the point that you made also just with regards to guys, learning how to pay attention a little bit, I think is a skill that men can learn. And when you can see, like you said beautifully, if the conversation's kind of naturally guiding itself towards, oh, you're hearing her, you're talking about some topic again, back to what we said earlier. When you have more things to speak about than just debates about Catholic history or Catholic theology, and you have conversations about interest, and if it starts popping up, and she talks about I don't know, some hike that she went on recently, and you're like, oh, I went on that hike also, and and you can see that there's some discussion that's leading itself, and you'd be like, oh, would you ever want to go on a hike together? There's ways it just becomes a natural progression, a natural flow within the conversation. I think that's great advice that you give. And another piece of advice that you offer in the book that I think is really practical for people, particularly when they're meeting folks in groups, is you say, if you meet somebody in a group, 10 minutes is a good kind of marker where have a conversation. If it goes well, that's great. And if it doesn't go well, then no problem. But try not to hog that person's time because
Mhm.
they're there to meet people too. And if things aren't going very well within 10 minutes, then okay, great. No harm, no foul. Let somebody else have an opportunity to talk to him or to talk to her, but not trying to fill that person's time or dominate that person's time in one evening.
Yeah, that's a good little concrete tip that, again, I got from a matchmaker, but I
Yeah.
found it really helpful. I think I think a lot of men have, in my experience, responded well to that tip because they like the concreteness of 10 minutes.
Guys are looking for that.
Yes,
Guys are looking for that. Absolutely.
right.
Guys we need the playbook, like you
Yes,
just tell us, give us the options. We're fine with the fishbone chart. If this happens, then we do this. And if this happens, we do this. Like
right.
give us the algorithm that we can follow and we'll do our best.
And I would caution not to be too absolutely rigorous with that. If you just
Yes,
keep
yes,
it to a
yes, for
one
sure,
and
sure,
you're
sure,
like,
sure, sure,
you gotta
sure,
run,
sure.
that's going to come across kind of
Well,
weird.
my
But
10-minute timer is going on my Apple Watch. Thank you so much. This
yes,
has been
yes.
enjoyable,
If you
but
want to
I
do
am going
that,
on to somebody else.
right?
Yeah,
If you want to do
don't do
that,
that.
go to a speed dating event where the timer is there for
Yes.
you and you're supposed to move on to the next person. That's a great fit. But
Well,
yeah,
tell me about that actually. So you talk about speed dating throughout the book. Uh, how does that work?
sure. So the basic concept is that a bunch of single people show up to some location, and it's kind of like usually the guys are the ones moving around, kind of like musical chairs. So
Hmm.
they'll talk to each woman who's there for some set amount of time. Different people run it different ways. When I was running these events, I always did 7 minutes because that seemed like enough time to kind of get into a conversation, but still, if the conversation was going well, you felt like, oh, that didn't feel complete. I want to keep talking to this person. So there was a little excitement to hopefully see them again. And the goal is that by the end of the night, everyone has met, a number of new people for a few minutes each, and they have some way to privately indicate if they're interested in going on a real date with any of those people. And
Hmm.
so, if both people were mutually interested in each other, then the organizers have some way of exchanging contact information and kind of letting you
Okay.
know you're a match. So, um, there's maybe electronic ways to do that, or sometimes we just use paper or whatever. But that's kind of the way to kind of meet people in a very intentional way, where you're looking for dates. Everybody's here for the same reason. A
Hmm.
little bit, as one of my coworkers put it, a little bit like a dating app in real life. So you get that, kind of spark and
But the
connection.
guys are always moving to the right, so nobody feels like they're being swiped left at, huh? So they're
That's a
always
good point. Yeah.
moving to the right for that reason.
Exactly, exactly. And they're not getting, she might say no, or not write him down, or whatever the method is, but it's not as in his face, so to speak. It's, you only know that someone indicated their interest in you if you were also interested. So
Hmm.
if you end up with no matches, that doesn't necessarily mean nobody was interested in me at all. It just means whoever you wrote down didn't write you down, or whatever. So
Okay.
there's a little bit of I think a little bit of a buffer, or something that can kind of, having the
That's
structure.
gotta feel like a little bit of a letdown, though, I would imagine
Oh
if you
yes, yes.
yeah,
No, when
that's
I've
tough.
run
Yeah.
it was hard, especially if someone tried going to several events,
Yeah.
over the course of a few months, and they were never getting any matches. That
Yeah.
it can be discouraging. But I tried to encourage people to go into it as kind of a fun thing to try. It's not your only opportunity to meet someone. It's not going to be the best fit for everyone. Not everybody's great meeting a bunch of strangers for
Mhm.
7 minutes each. But I think if it's something you've never done before, and you can find, especially a specifically Catholic or Christian speed dating event in your area, I think it's a great thing to just try out. Go into it just thinking, this will be fun to just meet a bunch of people and we'll see what happens, and not put too much pressure on it. And then,
Okay.
in my experience, a lot of people did at least get matches and go on some dates. And maybe it didn't go anywhere, but there were a number of couples who ended up engaged and married as a result, because either they first met through this event and it all just happened from there, or maybe they had kind of met before, but just that intentional setting where they had to really think, oh, do I want to say I'm interested in a date with this person or not, made them kind of think about it more, and kind of sparked the relationship starting, which was interesting. So at least in our local Catholic community, it's been pretty
That's
successful.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about, like, events that are singles, but are maybe like I don't know, like a hike or a camping trip or something like that, that
Mhm.
I've thought about something where it's like to change that variable as you spoke about. It's like, okay, well, we can meet on the Catholic ground, but maybe we can make that even smaller and do something that's like a singles or a kayaking trip where everybody just happens to be single. So you don't have like that singles
Yeah.
like label on it, or it's like a weekend camping trip where just so happens everybody is single on the event, type
Mhm.
of thing, where you kind of relieve that pressure a little bit, but everybody kind of knows why they're there. Well, I guess I'm proposing just kind of changing that variable where it's not just a Catholic thing, but it's Catholic and kind of making that subset being a little bit smaller.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about something like that?
Yeah, I think. honestly, anything and everything that encourages
Thank you
single
for saying.
people to get together and actually talk to each other, talk to people of the opposite sex is probably a great idea right now, as long as
Yeah,
it's, safe and moral. It's probably a good idea because it's going to be a good fit for somebody. It's going to spark some kind of connection. Um, I just recently connected with someone. I ashamed to say I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she runs something
that's
called the Catholic Singles Newsletter, and she just puts a bunch of events into a newsletter twice a week, and they do like Zoom rosaries and things. And she's organizing a trip to Hilton Head, I think, soon. With
awesome.
it's just Catholic singles from around the country who want to come on this trip and get to meet people that way. And so I think there's a lot of different options that just might work out for some people. Um, and I think it's an area where, at least among Catholic churches and dioceses, there's just kind of a desert of options. Usually, there might be young adult groups, which can be a really good start, but sometimes the definition of young adult is a little vague. Sometimes there's a lot of couples there.
Hmm.
Sometimes not. Sometimes there's just not enough people showing up to the young adult group to make it really a good opportunity for finding someone to date. So I think anything that can be kind of maybe citywide or diocese wide or even national. I've been to
Hmm.
the Young Catholic Professionals Conference a couple times,
Yep.
and this year they had some matchmakers come and do kind of
Yeah.
a mixer event, which was great because so many people who come to that conference do happen to be single, even though that's not what it's
Right.
specifically focused on. So,
Yeah, but I think that's another great example where it happens to be an event where there's a lot of single people there, but the
exactly.
focus isn't on the single element. The focus is on professional development.
Right.
But I think it's great. I've spoken to Peter, the executive director for YCP, and um, he's shared with me some of the things that they've done, which I think is wonderful. It's like, okay, we can just acknowledge that it's there without it dominating the whole event
Mhm.
either.
Mhm.
But certainly, I think that's a great place for people to be able to have some conversations and to meet, connect.
Yeah.
Because I think the one of the guiding principles that you make throughout the book is that if you're single, focus on meeting people. And if you can focus on meeting people, then you're just increasing the chances and the probability of you meeting the right person.
Yes.
And that's just a great paradigm to kind of go into. It's just to say, all right, my duty here is just to meet people. I think in the book you reference, is it Dr. Cloud who makes the recommendation of meeting 5 people every week, and
Yes.
that's a tall number. I mean, just
It
to
is.
think about that. But
Yeah.
meet 5 new people a week as kind of like a marker to say, I'm just forcing myself to get out and to meet people, to interact, to connect, not just 5 dates a week or just 5 guys that I'm interested in or 5 girls that I'm interested in, just 5 people, meeting
Mhm.
people, connecting. And for the extroverts, it's like, yeah, great, that's a lot of fun. But you indicated that you're introvert and you took on that challenge. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I stuck specifically to 5 a week. I wasn't quite I was a little intimidated by
That's a little much. That's
that. But
sure.
I did just change my mindset overall to I'm
Yeah.
gonna just go different places and try
Yeah.
to meet new people whenever I go places instead of staying kind of closed off, which was my default.
Yeah.
And it did make a huge difference. I was also trying to run a singles ministry and run all these
Uh-huh.
speed dating events at the same time, so I had to be connected with people in order to say, "Hey, come to our singles event if you're interested." And
Right.
so whether I was kind of meeting them for myself or for just bringing them into the group, either way, I was kind of just open to whatever happened. And I think it was really good as just a personal development challenge, and it
Hmm.
definitely led me to um, just realizing there were so many more great, just objectively great guys out there, really, than I thought there were in my area because I had kind of gotten into this scarcity mindset where if I got into a relationship with someone, I was very all in from the beginning because I felt like if I don't make this work, I don't know if there's any better option for me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
God really used this uh, meet people mindset, I guess, to show me that I could I could have a sense of abundance, not it's okay. I want to make sure I'm saying this appropriately, because there's a
Sure,
problem
sure.
with, going on Tinder and swiping through 1,000 profiles and going, there's infinite people out there, and not committing,
100%.
right?
Yep. No, I agree. I
But on
agree.
the
I
other
agree.
hand, thinking
Yeah.
there's only one person in my life who seems somewhat interested in me and vice versa, and maybe there's some very difficult things about this relationship, but feeling like you have to make it work because this is all you've got. That's the opposite extreme, and that can really be a problem. I think having the balance of a realistic idea of just how many people are out there and how different everybody is, and how you don't really know what your type is until you interact with a lot of those people and kind of get to know what
Hmm.
actually works best with your personality and vice versa. That was a really good exercise. And so I realized I had previously been thinking of finding my future spouse as something where I needed to start with a lot of caution and a lot of standards to make sure I was meeting someone who met the type of person that I ultimately thought I would marry.
Yes.
And instead, I started to think of it as more like a funnel where you just meet a lot of people because you don't know anything about these people yet. You don't know if they meet your standards. You don't know if your standards are the right standards necessarily in some cases,
Hmm.
or at least whether your preferences are the right preferences, I should say. Because we should have standards already in our minds, but preferences can be more
Obviously. Yeah.
flexible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And then it sort of can taper down from there. Like, all right, out of all these people I've met, am I somewhat interested in some of them? I'll get to know them a little bit more. I'll kind of see how it goes. And then with prayer and God's guidance, you kind of slowly focus in on, all right, I think this person, there's real potential here. I'm going to actually enter into a relationship with this person and develop it further so that we're actually discerning marriage. But you don't have to start with all the filters on, all the parameters, as
Hmm.
if you're shopping on
Hmm.
Amazon for a husband or wife. It should be the opposite. It should just be meet all the people that God has really created who are actually in your life, and then kind of put the filters on later and say, all right, do I see enough overlap here to be willing to go on a date? Do I see enough overlap to continue going on dates? Do I see enough overlap to become serious, exclusive, enter courtship,
Yeah.
kind of whatever you want to call that more serious phase, and so on.
And that's wonderful and encouraging. I can hear a couple comments on the other side, I guess, thinking about some friends of mine who are a little bit older, post 35. It's almost like I feel like there's like three categories when it comes to like dating. It's the high school, then it's college age to probably 30, mid 30s, and then it's like late 30s on, where you see
Mhm.
kind of shifts that are happening in people and their experiences. And my heart goes to each of those experiences. And I know that folks in their later 30s, early 40s are just, they can be discouraged. They can say, I've tried all of this, or I'm doing the funnel thing, but man, it just feels like a part-time job. It's like I
Mhm.
don't have the bandwidth to just keep meeting five people a week. I mean, that's crazy. I got a full-time job and other things that I'm involved in. I mean,
Right.
how does somebody just pace themselves in, well, two questions. How does somebody pace themselves appropriately where it doesn't feel like it's just a drag to keep meeting new people?
Mm.
But then the second question connected to that is, what about the person who genuinely has tried and is falling into that sense of, um, the spirit might be too strong of a word, but that's what came to mind, a sense of despondency about the whole thing.
Yeah, this is an area where I would I would love to continue, particularly focusing on those who are maybe 35, 40 and up, and interviewing more of them, because I will admit that since I didn't go through that part of the experience myself,
Right.
I don't have quite as much of the background there, but I do see a difference in that stage of life, because in part because oftentimes people, even if they're meeting a lot of people, it's people with much more baggage, maybe even previous divorces and things like that, maybe children
Right.
already. And so there are all these other layers that I will admit I don't have all the answers for all of that. But
Sure, sure.
I
For
think
sure.
one thing, so for the first question, I think if it starts to feel too much like a job, or like you're getting burnt out, um, it it might be kind of an imbalance, I guess. I think when you're starting on that mindset of I just need to meet more people, I need to fill the top of the funnel and just meet lots of people,
Mhm.
I think it's also important to balance that with meeting people in situations and places and through activities that you also genuinely enjoy. So you're also sort of just feeding your own um, life and living a rich,
Mhm.
well-rounded life for yourself. So hopefully, you're not forcing yourself to go to something you're totally uninterested in, but just, oh, there might be some people there that maybe I'll end up marrying, because I think that could make it really feel like a drag very quickly. I encourage people to, you know, sort of pick and choose the groups or activities or places or volunteer work or whatever it is that you would want to do it anyway, but go into it with that mindset of, I'm also trying to meet more people here. Maybe instead of just going to the gym by myself, maybe I can find a more social way to exercise or whatever it is, or
That's good.
kind
That's
of
good.
looking
Yep.
for those ways where it can overlap. So that's part of it. I think also just staying really close to God in prayer and asking Him, what do you really want me to focus on? Maybe I am doing too much. Keep a couple evenings open each week and maybe spend some time in the Adoration Chapel or just sit at home alone and journal about things that have been happening lately. Have that space for your internal life and your relationship with God to kind of turn back to and draw strength from, so that you're not just expending energy constantly and not being centered. Um, and then the whole struggle with despair or despondency. You call the podcast "Always Hope," and
Yep.
so yes, we should always hope, and it makes me very sad to hear people being hopeless. I was at the National Eucharistic Congress for part of the
Yeah.
and
I was there too. It
oh
was
really,
great.
okay,
Yeah.
almost everyone was.
Among the 60,000 people that were there.
So there was an event. I'm not sure if you heard about it, that Catholic University of
Yep.
America put on this
Mhm.
dating panel,
Yeah.
and they did one of those word cloud things where people could text a number and they
Yep.
said, send the two adjectives that you think describe dating right now or something like that. And for the long time, the biggest word on there was hopeless. That's how people were
Mm,
feeling about dating.
mm,
And I totally see why. I mean, I had my hopeless days myself where it just felt like I've tried everything,
yeah.
this is impossible. But that was right before everything changed. And then I met my husband, and then we were married very quickly. And I know people who
Mm,
went years and years, maybe thinking they would never end up married at all. Maybe they just decided to kind of focus on other things in their lives. And then God surprised them by letting them meet someone who ended up being their spouse, and now they're very happy. And I don't think anyone, even if they get married at 40, 45, 50, I don't think anyone looks back and says, yeah, I just kind of settled for this person eventually because I couldn't find anybody
mhm,
else. No, they
mhm.
say, you know what? It was really hard to wait that long, but now I would never exchange this person and this marriage for anything in the world.
Right.
And that's
Right.
so beautiful to me that sometimes it's like when we get to heaven, we'll be able to look back at our lives and even the suffering will be redeemed and we'll see the purpose in all of it. I think it's like that once you're actually with that person who really is the right fit, you really are in that happy, holy relationship, you can look back and see that all the rejections and the struggles and breakups were keeping you from marrying somebody else that you shouldn't have married in some sense. And then
Mhm.
you ended up with this person that you're so grateful for. So I
Right.
hope that gives people a little bit of hope, that it's all going to be worth it in the end, whatever ends up happening. And um,
I think so.
yeah,
And also just recognizing that, I mean, e for some people, there is a question of discernment in terms of saying,
mhm,
if it is too much and the hurt is too much and it's just not worth the effort, then it's okay to let go.
right?
And recognizing that even just stepping out, God is going to operate even within your singleness.
Mhm,
And God might be calling folks to a dedicated singlehood that embraces the lay life to its fullness. And there's a gift and a presence within that as well. And that's not to be despairing to say that these are the circumstances that I've dealt with. And we all have to make best with the hand that's given to us.
right.
And we all have to acknowledge that we have certain confines within our lives and we're not always going to get everything that we want. And so I'm not saying that to be despairing, but I am saying that these are moments where it's worth you really taking to prayer and saying, okay, Lord, here's the context of my life. You know where my heart is. What are you calling me to? And what are you asking me to do?
Yeah.
And if it is too much, then the Lord knows that, and you disengaging from the dating scene, I don't even think it's necessarily a sign of failure. It's just an acknowledgement
Mhm,
of where your heart is and
mhm,
what you're capable of giving or not giving, what you're capable of doing or not doing. And God meets us in that space. And if we let go and we say, all right, Lord, I entrust myself to you, then we entrust our lives to him. And we believe that he still calls us to holiness, whether we're dating or married or not. He still is operating within the very particular circumstances of our lives and revealing himself and finding his presence and wanting us to be able to see him and see how he's working within our lives, even if we're not necessarily getting the answer to the one prayer that we've been holding on to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think some people have a stronger or less strong desire for marriage to begin with, and that's okay. For myself, I had to just acknowledge, this is a really strong desire in my heart. I really
Right.
can't imagine my life without it. So I'm going to kind of keep trying, even when
Yep.
it feels a little overwhelming sometimes or it feels difficult. But I have friends who are, not just because they're older and have just decided to give up, but who from a younger age just thought, if I end up married, wonderful, but it's just not something I'm going to focus on pursuing right now. I'd be content if it never happened, and that's okay.
Mhm.
I think it's so beautiful that our Catholic faith shows us that celibacy, as long as we're living a fruitful life and serving God and serving the community in other ways, as long as it's not out of selfishness that we're remaining single, then that's something that's so wonderful and really so needed. Some
Mhm.
people remaining single and being just helpful in a way to other people around them in unique ways that maybe a married parent just can't do, is that's always been part of the community. And I think that is a really beautiful thing that if someone wants to embrace that or just ends up in that role and does it well, it's wonderful.
Well, Rachel, thanks so much for taking time to be with me today. And thanks for taking time to be able to answer the questions that we had today. So, just a couple final questions as we're wrapping things up. If people are interested in getting the book, how can they do that?
They can go to prettygoodcatholic.com. That just directs to the publisher's website, has a whole table of contents and a little sample there and lots of information. So you can order it from there. And it is also available through Amazon, Kindle, Apple Books, etc.
Sounds great. So people can get a print copy if they want, or if folks are Kindle, iPad readers, and it's available for them on all those e-platforms as well. Even though we want to encourage people to go to the publisher because it's a little bit cleaner, get a little bit more of a cut than the
Support a small
support
Catholic publisher.
support the small
Yes.
Catholic publisher. Absolutely. So we want to encourage that. And so, final question to ask all my first time guests, Rachel, what gives you hope?
Hmm. So, for my personal life, of course, I would say the Lord gives me hope.
Amen.
Jesus
Great
died
answer.
for
It's a
my
Catholic show.
sins.
Great.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've got to say that, up top. But I think related to this topic today of dating and marriage and trying to help single people kind of move into their vocation, um, I have so much hope from seeing how many people are humble enough and brave enough to admit that they don't already know how to date perfectly, that they're not able to just find a spouse and create a perfect relationship on their own, and that they need help from others. And I think that humility is just such a good virtue to practice that's going to make you a better future spouse to someone, for one thing. So that gives me a lot of hope. And I think seeing the Holy Spirit kind of encourage people to look for these resources and then bringing people to create those resources as well and inspiring both sides of that equation. That just gives me a lot of hope for the future, and that maybe we can start to solve this problem of prolonged singleness and get people into happy, holy marriages if that's what they're called to.
Praise the Lord. Almost as if the Lord is real and cares about us and calls
Yes.
people up to meet the needs that are present. But as you indicated, it is difficult. And so grateful to see people who do take that step and are courageous and are availing themselves to the resources, and folks who are still trying and want to be able to continue to discern and know how the Lord is operating within their life. And they want to do the best that they can to prepare themselves should the Lord lead them towards a happy, holy marriage. So, Rachel, thanks so much for coming on the show. Just a wonderful time and chat that we had today. So many blessings to you and good work on, and blessings on the work and the good work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.